to Lorenzo Kamel about all these developments. He's a professor of history of international relations at the University of Turin and is joining us from Rome in Italy. Thank you very much for being with us. Let me ask you your thoughts first about this resolution, which has finally passed after days of negotiations. It was diluted, a resolution calling for increased aid. What effect do you think it will have now that it's passed?
Yes, this resolution will have a very, very limited effect, not least because providing humanitarian aid under the bombs is kind of a contradiction in terms. Creating the condition for a ceasefire, as stated in the resolution, is a diplomatic way for saying not to a ceasefire, and this comes after a disproportionate attack which killed over 9,000 children. This resolution will not stop the goal that has been expressed by Israel Minister of Intelligence and by other top officials in Israel of fostering the so-called humanitarian evacuation of the Palestinians toward the Sinai. Back in 1948, 150,000 Palestinians succeeded to remain within the borders of the State of Israel. We will see how the situation will turn today. Let me just briefly mention that just 3 days ago, the General Assembly, so not the Security Council, but General Assembly of the United Nations passed a resolution reaffirming the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. Just 4 states voted against that resolution out of 193 member states of the UN. These 4 states were Micronesia, Nauru, Israel, and the US.
Right.
And the US very often...
Yeah, just go ahead and finish your thought, and I'll ask you my following question.
Yes. I want to just say that the U.S. very often claim to be to favor the self-determination of both Israelis and Palestinians. But if that was indeed the case, the U.S. would have voted not only for the resolution that I just mentioned, but also for the many resolutions that condemn the growth of settlements in the occupied territories. They would have tied the U.S. aid to the end of the settlement growth. They would have eliminated the tax deductions that the U.S. citizens can obtain if they provide donation to settlements. And also, the last thing, also the visa ban for settlers that Washington a few days ago announced is largely a facade because the majority of the settlers are U.S. citizens. They don't need a visa anyway.
So you think largely a facade, but is it perhaps because it's happening at the Security Council now that we have this first resolution adopted at the Security Council since the conflicts began, even if it's a diluted text? Is it, though, perhaps a watermark moment after the massive international pressure Israel has found itself in?
No, I think that the real way forward will be first to implement a ceasefire, or that we cannot at this stage think to, let's say, major and definitive solution. Now it's time for the little steps, and of course, it's also a huge step in many ways. So the ceasefire would be the real game changer. The second game changer, more structural, would be to pay attention to the volcano. So what is this volcano? The volcano is the fact that according to UN data, between January 2008 and the 6th of October 2023, have been killed 6,407 Palestinians and 308 Israelis. Most of them in both cases were civilians. So if you have such a high number of people killed in a handful of years, you have a situation in which you have millions of civilians that are tried in a military course. It's the only place in the entire world in which, since more than half a century, there are millions of civilians tried in military course. So if you are in front of this, you are in front of a volcano. You can cover the volcano with a cap, but then the volcano will erupt. We must condemn the eruption in an equivocal way, because targeting civilians, both in the case of Hamas and Israel, is never acceptable. But if we don't take care of the volcano, not only that volcano will erupt again, but we want to help these two peoples to find a bridge message to enable them to live side by side.
Lorenzo, please, Professor Lorenzo, let me ask you about the Europeans before we go to break. I mean, they're announcing additional aid to the West Bank and to Gaza. And there's been a lot of criticism of the U.S., of course, in the way it supported Israel in this war. But what about the Europeans? And does making this gesture of additional aid to Gaza change anything to the fact that they've largely seemed to have abandoned the Palestinian people?
Yes, that won't change anything. In the past, when the European Union and European countries were less dependent and less subject to U.S. interests and policies, European countries played a much more prominent diplomatic role than today. Also Italy, my country, at the time of Andreotti, Craxi, and The other prime minister was a meaningful actor in the Eastern Mediterranean, was a meaningful factor in this conflict, while today we are pretty much irrelevant at the political level in this conflict because of the unbalance. And I think that this is a major problem and a pity, also from a selfish perspective, because this is not a faraway conflict for us. Anti-Semitism, Palestinianism, Islamophobia, they are so visible and entrenched in our own society. So to have a real concrete role by the European Union and European countries would be really, really important also for us.
Thank you so much for talking to us and sharing your views. Lorenzo Kamel, Professor of History of International Relations at the University of Turin. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.